Welcome to This Week in Education. My name is Shaylee. I'm a former educator turned homeschool mom and founder of K3 Homeschool Foundations. Every week, I'm going to be bringing you trends and information that's happening within education, and I hope to empower you as parents and educators. This week, we're going to be talking about the $7 billion freeze that Donald Trump has put on education funds. We are going to talk about the homeschool surge, AI in education, and vouchers. Let's dive in. $7 billion in education funds are frozen. People are so upset about this because he is withholding programs in K through 12. We're talking English second language programs, summer programs, teacher trainings as well. There are so many things that he is freezing, and this is making a lot of people mad. And I totally get it because it's like, okay, now these kids are without these programs and what are they going to do? And there are also layoffs. I think he laid off like 1,400 employees or something like that. I think this was at the Department of Education. However, I have heard in my comment section that it's also teachers as well. And so I think that this is definitely going to put another squeeze on the school system, but there is misuse of funds. As a public school teacher, I can promise you there is a lot of money coming in to the public schools, and there is a lot of wasted money within the public schools. If you are an educator and you know of the wasted funds, or a parent that knows of wasted funds and better ways that we could spend it, let me know. I think that it could go to the kids a little bit better. Also, it's very interesting because you have, superintendents or NEA presidents or just any teachers unions really like yelling about this in like very unhinged ways about how they're not going to have funding for all of these different things. But one thing to know as well that I know of is that superintendents get bonuses if they are doing certain things within the schools. And so like, what does that look like? Are we getting bonuses for social emotional learning stuff, for CRT, for gender studies? Like, what are we getting bonuses for? Is it because their kids are, or their students are, showing progression in reading and writing, or math? I really don't know. So that's kind of one thing that I want to know is that they can get large bonuses. And supers and the presidents of the teacher unions are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And these unions are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and a lot of the funds that they're they are using to contribute to political campaigns. Like, instead of screaming at everyone or screaming at Trump that he's freezing all these funds, you have hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, I get we're talking 7 billion here, but if we looked at each teachers union and looked at how much money they're making as far as a institution from teachers paying these dues, don't you think they could donate it instead of like yelling at everyone else? And it's also very funny because they're always talking about how like they're taking from the rich and whatever and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you guys are so rich. All right. You have so much money. Like, some of these people are making like $400,000 a year, not superintendents per se, but like the presidents of these teacher unions. Like, so glad you guys are making so much money. Maybe you should donate some. I don't know. Don't really feel like you need to make that much. So there is just so much misuse also, like I said, in education. And I understand that this is a problem because schools are going to struggle to meet the needs of their students. But I think if we were to use our funds a little smarter, we might be able to fix the problem, because I've done other episodes on the amount of money that is spent in public education. And sometimes there's like $25,000 per student being spent, and they're like the lowest in reading scores and math scores. So I don't even feel like money necessarily is the problem, because you have $25,000 going to each child. Okay, that's insane. And we're talking like Chicago public schools. Okay, could we potentially use that money? Like, you don't need $25,000 per student. Okay, Utah I think spends like $7,000 or $8,000 per student, and like we have pretty decent reading. I think we're like middle of the ground here, and they're like at the bottom. So you don't need that much money to actually educate the children. So I feel like you could find ways to continue these programs, and I get it, it's going to be hard, but I think you can do it. And I also think that's why parents are starting to turn to alternative education models, because it's more stable. One, and you get to make choices that you want to make for your child. You're not following this one size fits all model. So there is like so many different things that parents are looking at and saying, maybe I should homeschool my kid. Speaking of homeschool, we're going to go into the homeschool surges in 2025 because it's a big one. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know that I'm doing it really well. We're going to talk about why you are doing it really well, because homeschoolers, you are. And then we have my favorite, Ron Swanson. He's like my spirit animal. So if you know me, that is Ron. Okay. I am Ron. We are one in the same. How can you homeschool if you're not a teacher? Not to worry. I have a permit. I can do what I want. Ron. And I just think it's so funny because that is the number one thing that I see in my TikToks about homeschooling is that you have to be a teacher. You have to be an expert. You have to have this training. No, you do not. That is not true. Okay. I am a past educator, so I know what it looks like to teach kids. And let me tell you, it's mostly pulling up a curriculum, reading from said curriculum, and then teaching it to your child. And the fact that you're teaching one-on-one is going to be way better than teaching 20 kids at one time. But what about second breakfast? And I totally feel that as a breastfeeding mom. I feel that. What about second breakfast? I need my second breakfast. So let's talk about the homeschooling surges in 2025, because as I was looking into this, it was pretty crazy because in 2020, there was a giant surge because I think people were totally over what was happening in the school system. Also, some people were homeschooling in 2020, but they weren't homeschooling. Okay. They were trying to do school at home and it wasn't working out. And that is why. But let's talk about it. 3.7 million kids are homeschooled in 2025. That's up from 2.5 million. That is insane. All right. Now, here are the reasons that people give based on a poll. 72% disliked the academics and 80% wanted safety. Now, I totally get the dislike academics. In 2020, parents' eyes were actually opened to the fact that their kids weren't learning to read and haven't been being taught to read properly for decades. Even with math, same thing. Okay. And their eyes were opened and they were like, holy crap, they're not even like teaching my child how to read and do math and write. Like these are basic skills that I thought that if I sent my child to school, they would learn, and they're not. And so I'm going to do it myself, and I'm going to choose the curriculums and the programs that my child is going to use to teach reading. FYI, if you do need help in teaching your child to read, I have got you. That is why I created K3 Homeschool Foundations, is so that I could provide you with the information you needed to teach your child to read using actual brain science, what I use to teach my students to read as a first grade teacher. And I increase their scores by like 50% by using these methods. So if you need a just super brain friendly way that can even help dyslexic kids learn to read, check out the description down below and I'll have a few links and you can check that out. But 80% want safety. I personally, working in schools, I've worked in 2 different districts. I never necessarily felt unsafe, but I was also in like really nice cities, I guess. However, it always crossed my mind, the fact of safety. And I think that that is something, whether it's like bullying from other kids, whether that's unfortunately like you're thinking of like an active shooter, or you're thinking of just anyone really off the street coming in, like harming your child, or even a teacher harming your child, or whatever that is. Because I know there are so many crazy things coming out right now about educators and, yeah, I don't know. There's some crazy stuff going on there. So I feel you on that. That's why I wanted to homeschool my children, is because all of the same things, you guys, those are part of my reasons as well. But they're also choosing homeschooling for flexibility and tailored learning. So let me know down below, like, if you are homeschooling, like what were your reasons behind homeschooling? I would love to hear from you, because I'm only on the beginning journey of this homeschooling thing. My daughter is still very young. And so I would love to learn from you fellow homeschoolers. But really, homeschooling fits the needs of all kids. Like, this is something that I think is missed in public schools, is it's a one size fits all model. And so you're going to have kids with all these differing needs, and you just can't meet them. You just can't. Like, it's just impossible. It really, truly is. And so being able to homeschool, you can move at their pace. You can allow them to learn the way they need to learn, whether you have somebody that talks a lot or is a big mover. Those kids that move a lot, if they are defiant or they talk a lot, they're going to get in trouble a lot in school, and they probably aren't going to love it as much because they are not able to be them. So I think that it's super cool that homeschooling is surging. That's my own opinion. But let's talk about AI, because AI is reshaping education. And in some ways, I think it's good. In some ways, I think it's bad. AI in schools provide teachers with more time to help kids, ... And then it says school officials add more meetings about meetings to the schedule. If that is not life as an educator, I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, we get this extra prep period. This is going to be so amazing. And then somehow another meeting would come to fruition, and it was the most pointless meeting that could have been an email. That is like the essence of being an educator. Like, you think you are going to get this extra time and then you don't. And honestly, most meetings I felt like could have been an email. But that's just my opinion. If you're an educator, you can probably relate. We have all of these problems in education, but don't worry, AI is going to fix them. Let's talk about it. The White House is promoting an AI tool, like I think it's Canmigo is what it's called. This is actually from like Khan Academy. So if you've ever heard of Khan Academy, it's, I guess, an off branch of that. I tried to do as much research as I could on it, and there's not much on it. But you have other options besides just like AI. Like when we're talking about technology and education, there are so many options. Obviously, I used it as a public school teacher. We use like Imagine Learning or Waterford, or there's so many different programs out there that are like AI learning programs. And I think that there are some good with them for sure. You have to tell the kids how to use it, because if you're not using it properly, it's not going to be beneficial. Like I had a lot of kids that would just press the buttons and then they'd get really upset because they would be stuck on the same concept. And I'm like, well, yeah, dude, you just press buttons. Or I would have a kid that's reading at like a 3rd or 4th grade level, and then on his AI program, it says he's at a 1st grade level. And I'm like, okay, listen, my friend, you are pressing buttons, and you can see, obviously, they're going through, a lesson that should last 30 minutes and they're doing it in like 5 minutes. So what I'm trying to say here is AI can be beneficial if you use it appropriately and you teach the child how to use it, and motivate them to use it correctly. However, there are different programs. So this is a really crazy stat. 50% of OutSchool's 100,000 monthly users are homeschoolers. OutSchool is a super, super cool program, or not even program, but I guess company, that allows people with expertise. So if you're like, you need an expert, here are your experts, that can post, different lessons on it. So you can do pre-record lessons. You can sign your child up for a virtual, mini lesson with a teacher that's maybe teaching piano or teaching reading or teaching whatever it is that you want to have your child learn. So you can really base it on their interests. If you need to outsource your help for, teaching your child to read or math or whatever, you can find people that are doing that and are doing live lessons or have pre-recorded lessons. I actually have a pre-recorded lesson on OutSchool for teaching letters. It's called the Reading Mysteries, or the Letter Mysteries, excuse me. And we are talking about the letters. I do lots of hands-on stuff within the packet that I provide with the pre-recorded lessons. We also sing songs and we move our bodies and all kinds of fun things that we do in that. So if you're interested, you can go to my website at k3homeschoolfoundations.com, go to my Letter Mysteries, and you can find that on OutSchool. I do have a code for you though. So if you do that, I'll put all of my links, don't worry, down in the description, but it's Shaylee Flint, K3 HOMOUTRE 20. I know, long code, wish I could change it. And you get a discount on your first course. So if you are interested in OutSchool, go ahead and use that discount code. Also, AI is going to personalize learning for unique student needs. That is one cool thing, is AI programs will teach your child exactly what they need. So it does like little assessments to see what your child needs to work on, and then it will progress them through different lessons. And it's going to go in a progression that makes sense based on research. They get to work on what they need and they get to move at the pace they want. So it is beneficial in that way. But like I said, you have to make sure that you're teaching your child how to use it. There was one example of a Florida mom that was homeschooling her child, and she actually used AI to boost her son's engagement, and she did that within science. And so she didn't have the expertise in science that she wanted, and so she decided that she was just going to use an AI program, and that's what she did. There's also a school called 2 Hour Learning School, and they use AI. That is all they do. They have guides. They don't even call them educators. They call them guides. They're guiding the child through their education, and they are finding a ton of success with that. And they use an AI model. I don't really know what this AI model is. I wish I knew more information on that, but they are finding a ton of success. And then I also have a tweet here, and it's from Austin Allred, and he said, tomorrow wraps up the first 5 months of my kids attending the school where all of the learning is powered by AI and no teachers. I wonder if this is the 2-hour learning. I don't know. I didn't confirm that. But they do have guides. They're just not considered teachers. And he gets asked almost every day what the experience is like. In short, it's truly wild. Here's what it's like overall. Texas private schools' use of new AI tutor rockets students' test scores to the top 2% in the country. So it is possible for AI to be super beneficial, but like I said, I think we have to be careful in the way that we use it. And also I saw this crazy brain rot thing about like using ChatGPT and stuff, and how it's actually making kids less creative. They don't critically think as much. They don't problem solve as well because they're using ChatGPT as a crutch. But I think that it's important to note that, like I said, it's how you use it. So speaking of choosing a personalized learning for your child, let's go into school vouchers. School choice seeks to make all education public. And then we have another one, government. We are offering school choice and money for expenses. All we ask is you register with us so we may ensure that your kids get a proper education. And then it says old school homeschoolers. Okay. And he's like, we already had a choice. Freedom doesn't come with a leash. Parents, have you ever wondered what your kids are really learning about important topics like taxes, freedom, and responsibility? As an educator, I once had to teach a social studies lesson that only focused on the positives of taxes, completely ignoring the downsides of over taxation or the importance of personal responsibility. It made me realize how limited the perspective is in many traditional curricula. That's why I'm so passionate about the Tuttle Twins books. These books teach kids both sides of important issues like economics, freedom, and entrepreneurship in a way that's fun, engaging, and easy to understand. They help children think critically and understand the world in a more balanced way. If you're ready to check it out, use my link down below to explore their incredible resources, give your kids the tools to think for themselves, and support my podcast. So I think when I'm looking at school vouchers, I totally get what they're saying in this, that like, okay, if you're accepting money from the government, there could be strings attached. And I have seen some crazy stuff with different states and like school boards and stuff, like talking about like, how can we get into these homeschoolers' homes basically and control what they're doing. And they're like almost like sending DCFS to their homes because they're like, well, we don't know if you're neglecting your child or if you're doing this or that or whatever. And I'm not saying there aren't bad people out there that potentially are like, I'm going to homeschool my kid and then I guess neglect them. But for the most part, we're talking majority, they're homeschooling because they want something better for their child. They don't want to send their child to the public school. They want to dictate what they teach their child and how they teach their child. And they don't want the government, because really public schools are government schools, the government coming into their home and telling them what they should do. So you kind of have to look at it a little bit like that. Like, are you accepting money from the government and are they eventually going to control what you're doing at home? And now it's like a public school, right? So anywho, we're going to talk about the school voucher expansion because Trump and his big, beautiful bill did $5 billion in tax credits for school choice. And this is more for, like ESAs and stuff. So for example, like an ESA in Texas, you can get like $10,000. In West Virginia, you can get like $4,489 to fund alternatives. So this money does have to go toward education. You can't just use it for however you want to use it. And then parents can also pay for, like I said, tutoring, curricula, micro schools, things like that. And really what's happening, and this is the one thing that the union presidents and even public school teachers and principals and superintendents are screaming about, is that, hey, you're taking money from us and now the poor people are going to suffer because you're taking money from the poor people, essentially is their argument. And like the school choice thing, the vouchers is them trying to say, okay, we need to provide those that can't afford, a different choice. Now, I do know that with certain school vouchers, like it's not going to pay for an elite private school. Like you are still going to have to come up with, another lump sum of money to be able to pay for it. However, homeschooling does not take that much money. Yes, one parent might have to be home, although I've seen a lot of families that both work and still homeschool, because it doesn't take 8 hours to homeschool your child. Okay. It only takes 8 hours if you're in a public school, but if you are just teaching your child, like max up to high school age is like 2 hours. So it really does not take that much time to do it. And you're working one-on-one, so they can move through things very quickly. So like there's a lot of homeschoolers that will graduate high school at like 14 years old. Like you can just zoom through this stuff. Anywho, what they're doing is they're saying, Kate, these vouchers are only going to go to these families that need them first, which is the low income families. And then from there, middle class. And then from there, if there's anything left, then it can go to the upper class people. And also I want public schools to look in the mirror, because if you're losing money because you don't have as many people coming into your schools, that means your school sucks. Fix it. Like ask the parents if they're coming in and they're like, I want to unenroll my child in your school and I'm going to homeschool them. Ask them why. Have them tell you. Maybe they're like, you don't teach my child to read and write effectively, or you don't teach them math, or you have a bullying problem at your school, or I just don't like the model of schools. I think that the model is a one size fits all. I think you're propagandizing my child. I don't like that you're teaching them gender studies. I don't like that you're not teaching them, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank. And then the schools could say, okay, well, most of my parents don't like this, so maybe I should change. That's how private schools work. So, public schools, look in the mirror. While public education funding is being frozen and programs like ESAs are giving families more options to choose alternative learning paths, I think that it's important that we continue to rethink education because the model that we're using is obviously not working. It's failing more students than it's helping. So are you feeling stuck and frustrated with your child's education? Share how you're navigating that in the comments. I would love to hear your story. And like I said, I'm going to do this each week, and we're going to talk about what's trending in education or what's happening in education. And if you have other topics that you would like me to cover, let me know down below and I will dig into it and we will talk about it so that you can understand what's happening and how it might affect you as an educator, as a parent, how it'll affect your child. But yeah, we will see you next week, and go ahead and press that like and subscribe, or send this to someone that you think might like it.